And that moves me to a character that is such a bitch, that being Valentina. But the dynamic does work really well because you throughout this whole movie, you're like, someone kill this woman. But then hello, everyone. Welcome to No Drama, Just Movies, and we are back this week with another movie review. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for all the content that we produce each and every week in the world of TV and movies. My name is Cameron, so that asterisk does mean something. Ellie Smith, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague here.
I'm Phil. Are we some kind of Thunderbolt squad? Corwin. I
Oh,
can't
that's
do Will
right.
Smith voice. I'm
I mean,
trying.
if you haven't guessed it by now, but you should have, based on the title of this video, and of course, Phil's little nickname there, we are here to review none other than Marvel's Thunderbolts. Asterisk. We'll get to that. This is, of course, obviously the final movie in phase 5 of this multiverse saga. We've got one more phase next, obviously, starting with the Fantastic Four in a few months. But here we are with Marvel's Thunderbolts. Now, I'll obviously start this by saying that I think one of the shining lights over the last week has been the reactions. The reviews are incredibly positive. People are talking about this being the best movie since Endgame, or one of the best movies since Endgame. It's getting a lot of praise. I was very excited because of that. And I wasn't let down. I wasn't let down. This is a good movie. I think this is a good movie. It's not
Not a
as
great one.
yeah, but it's good. It is good. It's got a lot of promise. There are a lot of good things about it. It is back to form and basics in many ways. And once again, we joked about this. I have mentioned this before for obviously Marvel. But I think that when I say back to basics, I think that they do a lot of simple things effectively well. It feels a bit more simple. And it kind of is going back to form in that way, building characters, and making a more interesting dynamic and kind of story. And a good villain, quote unquote, in this one.
Yeah.
And that asterisk means something. God damn it, it means something. And this is I think this is a pivotal movie moving forward. I think it has consequences in a good way. It means something. Thank goodness we needed a Marvel movie that meant something for the future. Not to
Oh,
say
God.
that's the only thing, but there's a lot to talk about with this one.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot to talk about with this one. This one is a spoiler review, so we will get into that imminently. What are your initial thoughts on Marvel's Thunderbolts?
I really enjoyed it. It was, like you said, back to the basics, and I think back to the characters, because
Mm.
that's the parts we fall in love with, right? It's the when we think of the, can I spoil it? The first Avengers, back in the day, the first Avengers film, we did fall in love with Tony and Cap and Thor, Hulk, all these people, and it was the characters that we wanted to follow. And here I got a feeling that, yeah, I really like these characters, and I want to just see what they get up to.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, this is a spoiler review. Let's go into it. So,
Spoil away.
that asterisk means something,
Ha!
God damn it. It means something because we have the new Avengers. And that is not just a saying, they are legitimately the new Avengers. Kevin Feige told us months ago that that asterisk was there for a reason, and the reason being because they start off as the Thunderbolts and they end up being officially crowned the new Avengers. And obviously that's at the end of the movie. The movie literally ends with that announcement. But I think it's interesting because you mentioning, talking about what the good times and going back to the characters, and you think about those moments in, for example, Joss Whedon's Avengers in 2012, and it is interesting because it's like the new Avengers kind of sounds just like a fitting name, not just in theory, but also spiritually, because it does feel like, as you're alluding to, it does feel like a movie from back in the day with Marvel to a degree. It does feel like, it kind of does feel like 2012 again in a way, and the character moments I think here are the thing that stands out. However, the thing that stands out for me even more is Sentry. I think that Sentry, I was looking forward to Sentry so much going into this movie. I think that's a fascinating character. I think that they do. Sentry is a great character in this movie. I think, however, they just don't fully capitalize on the route that they started off with him. Specifically, this is a character, Bob, good old Bob, who is suffering from, at least it's never said flat out if
Mm.
he's suffering from a specific mental illness, but he alludes to the fact that he's clearly suffering mentally. And it does give signs that he is suffering from a specific or potentially multiple mental illnesses or disorders. There's a specific line he says early on in the movie that, he is tired of, having the highs and the absolute lows.
Yeah.
And the way he describes that, we were speaking afterwards, whilst we were having a drink after watching the movie, as you do. The Avengers have shawarma and we have a drink. And so, but that when Sentry said that, when Bob said that, it reminded me very much of like a bipolar disorder, for example.
Yeah.
And I thought that this was such a fascinating idea of having this character who suffers from a mental disorder turns superhero, but it is that mental disorder that makes him just a complete, I don't know even what the word is, just something that is a risk because of what he can do or what he's possible, what he's possible of doing or capable of doing. But unfortunately, I feel like they just don't fully take it where it could be. And I don't know if that was intentional or not. I don't know if that's because they don't want to delve too deep into specific, mental health disorders. We look at, for example, Todd Phillips' Joker movie, and that movie was polarizing in terms of how people thought how that movie dealt with mental health. And so maybe this is just an assumption. It probably isn't true, but maybe that was something that they didn't want to delve too deeply into the idea of glorifying mental health, now of turning someone who suffers from a mental disorder into, this cool, villain / hero. Maybe they didn't want to do that. I don't know. I was just disappointed that they didn't. But what was your thoughts on that?
To be fair, like he is coming back. Thunderbolts and Bob are returning. So maybe they kept that to have somewhere to go, to bring him back. I don't know, a later date, possibly like in more like a ensemble film. And just use his full potential there rather than, splooshing it all on the page now to give you that image. Speaking of Sentry, like I love...
You've been watching too much Florence Pugh, boy.
We get into the acting. But let's do Sentry first since we're on him. I love what Louis Pullman did with him, just that
fantastic performance.
How normal he seemed, I think at first, and for some reason I just loved like this costume, so to speak, like his clothes, just this hospital scrubs thing that he's wearing, and he looks so like different from all these like superheroes in their costumes when we first meet him. But then I also really, really enjoyed the design of when he does turn evil, when he does turn into this, dangerous godlike.
The void.
Because just that shadow, like silhouette with those glowing eyes as well. It gave me an idea of like a flashback to like anime, like anime horror characters or something, because that looks like something you could easily like draw, which would look great in like black and white or something. So yeah, you're right. He was a really good villain.
Yeah, no, he was, and I think like that's the thing. Like I think they did as great a job as I think they possibly could without really taking it just where I think I wanted it to go. But that's being selfish of me. I think that he looked cool. I love the silhouette style. I love that they still was delving into past trauma and his mental health in general. And I think that there is a similarity there, because then you look at a character like Yelena, and she starts this movie off in such a relatable way, because she's literally saying to Alexei, her dad, that she's looking for purpose. She's tired of this, especially after seeing the death of Natasha. She's tired of just this senseless killing and this life that just feels rinse and repeat, and she's looking for her grander purpose. She's soul searching, and that's why she connects with Bob in such a way, and why all the characters connect in such a way. But
Yeah.
specifically Yelena and Bob, because you similarly to Bob, the way that he obviously turns into the Sentry or gets these powers is because he goes soul searching in Malaysia because he's trying to find himself. And I do like this idea of all these characters trying to find themselves. You see the same with Red Guardian, with Alexei saying, that he's trying. He wanted Valentina's number so desperately off of Yelena because it's like, I have felt no higher calling and purpose than being the Red Guardian. And it feels like these characters get that. You get the same with obviously Walker as well. Obviously, because his mum, his partner and son left him. And then you get a similar thing with Ghost, I suppose. She's been tortured all her life. And I like that theme. I like that.
There's definitely a sense of like, this is about purpose but also regret and stuff. Because they're all, each one of them has done something wrong that probably like ruined their life in one way or another. So I love that it was consistent with that. And I think that's where the emotion comes from, right? That's why we care about these characters, when we get like that image of, in this Sentry vision, when we get John Walker sitting at home with his kid, and he's like on his phone scrolling through these reports of him killing, seen Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like there is a sense of, fuck, I screwed up, and I can't take that back. And they're just trying to do something good, again, trying to be the heroes. What I liked about Yelena, let's go to her, I guess. Which I only noticed like afterwards. There are two major scenes where she like leaps into something. Air quotes, because she's one leaping and one just stepping. With this, it opens with her just leaping off that tall building, second highest building I think in the world. A stunt that Florence Pugh wanted to do,
and she did it.
All the power to you. But she does that, and it's like, stepping off that ledge, and obviously she has a parachute, but it's kind of like, it's still a risk. And then her stepping into the void cloud. Maybe she knows what she's doing, but there's also still a risk. And just this idea that maybe, diagnosing her here, but that she's got a bit of a death wish at this point, which I thought was an interesting idea for her character, that she's kind of ready to die if it has to be that way. But if you thought the same thing.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from, because that actually made me think, like, it's interesting you were just reminding me there of all the characters in the movie, because there's one character in this movie.
There are more?
There is more. There is, because there's one character in this movie that I still adore, still has a special place in my heart. And he feels like he is just the cool character who is there. And he fulfills his role of being the cool character. But not much really happens with him, and that is obviously Bucky. He is the cool character in this movie, right? He's the Bucky remember. And I think that there is so much of an emotional attachment being a Marvel fan, or us Marvel fans, with Bucky, because he's been fleshed out so much. Whether that be, one of the greatest movies of all time, Marvel movies of all time, at least in Winter Soldier, another one of the greatest Marvel movies of all time in Civil War. And so, I suppose there doesn't need to be as much attention on him, but this, whole angle of him being in Congress now, it felt very short-lived. I thought maybe there was going to do something with that, especially after you get the tease of it in Captain America Brave New World, but they don't really do anything with that, and understandably so. I think that was short-lived anyway, or going to be, but it's very short-lived. Obviously, one of the MVPs, especially in terms of comic relief, you were talking about, the Marvel movies of old, and you look to, like, I don't know, as you said, an Avengers, 2012 Avengers, where, and there is a lot of callbacks to that movie, the Avengers Tower obviously being one of them, but, you talked about that movie, for example, reminding me of, the little quips, the funny parts, the moments. And Alexei, Red Guardian, he gives them all. Like, I hope that people go out and see this movie, because I think he is going to be a fan favorite if people go and see it, I hope. But he's great. He's just great. Like, he is a gem.
But he's also, like, not the straightforward, just comic relief, right? One of the
Yeah.
first things that we see him as is when Yelena visits him and he has that speech about wanting Valentina's number. And because he's like, look around, like, I'm not doing anything. I want to be a hero. That's my purpose and stuff. And just the sincerity in it, in his speech, was actually quite moving, because it does feel like, yes, he's a little bit more enjoys the superhero thing, but that comes out of this, that like, there's these two sides, right? Where he enjoys it when they're on a mission and he's like, yeah, let's do it. And he's like the more boisterous, I guess, most boisterous of them. But the flip side of that is when he's just sitting at home doing nothing. It comes with that sadness, with that kind of, I guess, regret as well. And I just love that they explored like all these facets of the characters rather than just making him the, one-dimensional comic relief. That's why I think I love that character.
No, I agree. I think he deserves to be a fan favorite, and I think he has a great showing, obviously, in the in What If season 3 as well with Bucky, and so going on from that to this is really nice. But the next comments I think I want to make about this movie more so relate to the end and the post-credit scene. Is there anything you want to talk about before that?
Yeah, just some negative things, I guess. Like 2 points. One is going back to Sentry, that I felt like his journey was a little bit too fast. Like, he goes from this kind of Bob who doesn't know, or we don't know that he has powers, to training his powers, or saying he can control them with Valentina, to suddenly he comes back and he's like this godlike figure. And it's like, when did that happen? And how did it get from there to up there? The other thing I would say is the stakes, because they didn't feel as real. And maybe that's a Marvel problem, because they kind of tend to bring everyone back from the dead at some point. So it didn't really, even when Yelena stepped into that void thing, I thought like, okay, she'll be back, right? So it never had that kind of tension that I wanted from, or get from other. We're doing like, we're reviewing The Last of Us right now. We just had the couple of a week ago or so, the episode where that happened. I don't want to spoil it because you didn't come for that. But that left a mark, right? That I'm not saying that Marvel can do that because they're more entertainment, but there has to be some stakes, and I didn't really feel that we had those.
Yeah. And I mean, to jump off that, like, in the comics, obviously, and I'm not that guy, and I promise you I'm not that guy that goes on, well, in the comics, they did this, and so they should do this. However, exactly, but as someone who wasn't as familiar with Sentry, but went back and had a look, at some of his comic parts, one of the things I found fascinating is that in the comics, this is a character who is schizophrenic, and suffers from anxiety. And I think, obviously, this kind of goes back to my point earlier on, but I think that if you really delved into the mental health aspects of this story, I think that there could have been more stakes there, because he doesn't feel as terrifying as he should be. Like I said to you after we watched this movie, like, this should feel like Superman, a schizophrenic Superman. And that's no disrespect to anybody who suffers from schizophrenia or anybody suffering from any kind of mental health disorder. That's something very near and dear to me and you, everybody. But it should feel like that. It should feel... The reason why I say it should feel like a schizophrenic Superman is because it should feel terrifying. It needs to feel terrifying. It needs to feel like knowing that you have this godlike character who is incredibly unstable, that needs to feel more scary than it did. It needs to have more, as you said, more stakes than what it had. Ultimately, no one died, in the sense he didn't kill anyone. He didn't tragically hurt anyone. That I feel like it's a touchy subject, but I feel like if you're going to touch on it, commit. You either go fully through with it and deal with the whatever and just, grow a pair, or you don't,
touch it properly. On the terror, I suppose, of Sentry, like when he...
Terror.
does when he does get his firepower, where like turns people into these shadow things and like evaporates them, I guess, or like incinerates them. That is terrifying. Just that idea that you can't get away from that. That someone could literally like just open his hand and you're gone. And so I would have, yeah, you're right. I would have liked a little bit more reaction, I guess, from the crowds. Maybe
And
more.
also, can I just quickly say, like,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you off, but not even just that they're gone, but you're subjected to obviously continuously live through your trauma. But it
We
never
don't
really
know that
felt.
at that point, to be fair.
Yeah, that is
That
true.
comes
Yeah,
later. So
yeah.
in that moment, all you see is people like literally vanishing within a split second and turning into these shadows. And you
Yeah.
go, what the hell is going on here? I don't
Yeah.
end up like that because I don't know what's going on.
Mm.
And it could have been a terrifying moment. And I think I needed some more reactions from the crowd. Just like people were running, but there was never a sense of like people actually like in like actual panicking.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit too tame, I suppose.
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree. But I mean, that then moves us to the end. And that moves me to a character that is such a bitch, that being Valentina. But it does, the dynamic does work really well because you throughout this whole movie, you're like, someone killed this woman. But then come the end, it is quite interesting because then she's like, she kind of uses it to her advantage where she takes credit, saying, well, this team that I actually wanted executed, actually, I can find an opportunity here and I'm going to announce you guys as the new Avengers. And I think the reaction I had seeing these guys being crowned as the new Avengers, I think is the reaction Marvel knew they would have. And as a result, it is worked into the movie in the closing credits where, they're showing the different magazine articles from the Hollywood Reporter and this outlet and that outlet, saying, Avengers, who, B team, who are they? And that is the thought process, right? That
Yeah.
it's like, the Avengers, like, sorry, this does feel like a very B team, but I'm intrigued as a result as to what that journey now looks like. And that then obviously leads us to the post-credit scene where in the first half of that post-credit scene, they are talking about how this is set 14 months after the end of the movie. And they're talking about, how Sam, who, in Captain America Brave New World is saying he's going to reform the Avengers, is having disputes with Bucky saying, listen, like, I'm trying to reform the Avengers. You guys aren't the Avengers. You kind of need to ditch that moniker. And so I'm intrigued to see where that goes. Like we talked about, obviously, after the movie, if this is going to lead to, maybe by the time we reach Doomsday or Secret Wars or Post, if the Avengers will now start to become more like an institution where, it's this whole big brand and you have these different subsidiaries, whether it be, the new Avengers, the West Coast Avengers, the Young Avengers, if they start to become more of a, an institution rather than just a solo team. And I think that opens it up for that. But obviously the big part of this post-credit scene is obviously they, get this alert on, or Yelena gets this alert on some kind of high-tech iPad saying that something's breaching the orbit, something's coming from outer space. They get the satellite up, and it is none other, obviously, than the Fantastic Four's little ship or whatnot, obviously entering Earth's orbit, which is interesting because obviously it seems to probably indicate that post-credit scene takes place after the events of the Fantastic Four movie, or that post-credit scene will be how we end or partly end the Fantastic Four movie, which I think is interesting. Obviously, this post-credit scene was hyped up a lot. I don't think it's as great as what people made it out to be, but it's still exciting, and I think it does make you question, okay, where are we going? And it does get you excited for Fantastic Four. However, what it doesn't do, at least just yet, we'll have to wait for Fantastic Four, is give you more of an idea or excitement for Doomsday and what's coming. But I think that Fantastic Four will be the one to actually do that. But what was your thoughts on that post-credit scene?
Yeah, I expected a little bit more as well because it was so hyped up. It's like, oh, this is like the best in a while as well. The best after credit scene. You have to stay for that, and you have it's and yeah, it's kind of, I don't know what it told us other than the Fantastic Four are probably going to go travel to because it is like 616, right? The whole like the main one where the Thunderbolts are, or the new Avengers now. So they're traveling to ours, but we could have guessed that already because at some point they have to like show up in the main universe. So it didn't really tell me anything new. Or I don't know what the new was. I don't know if I missed something, if there was a hint or some, but it felt more like here are the Fantastic Four, and they're in this universe now with everybody else, ready, I guess, for Doomsday. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that is an interesting thing. Obviously, the last thing from me, we see obviously in the Fantastic Four trailer that before Galactus arrives, Reed is saying, I've stretched the boundaries of space and time, and they heard, and you see on his board that he is working on this bridge of interdimensional travel, and so it is fascinating to see how, or to theorize now how that movie ends. I'm keen on the idea of it ending incredibly poorly, whether it be they do beat off Galactus and Silver Surfer, but unfortunately their world or their universe does come to an end, and that's why they has to then leave. Because otherwise, why would they leave? But I mean, I guess there's many other ways. But I'm excited. I think this is a good movie. We've got one more movie left before we set up, obviously, the big crescendo of this entire saga. And I think that this did a good job of getting us on the right track leading up to Fantastic Four, and I'm happy about that. But any final thoughts before we go to our icy review score?
No.
Well,
Let's go to Ices.
let's go to our icy review score. So, how many ices out of 10 will you give the Thunderbolts?
I would give it an 8 out of 10. I think I really enjoyed, like I said, the characters, and they made a lot of that, like, make a lot of that film. The acting as well, obviously, because you can't have characters without good actors. But yeah, it had some flaws. It wasn't perfect. Mainly the stakes and maybe the evolution of the main villain. So yeah, an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna echo that. I'm gonna go with 8 ICs out of 10 as well. I would like to see this movie again, actually. I would like to take it in again a second time to see how it makes me respond. But this is a back to form. This is a back to basics. It's a good movie, and I like what they're doing here. It does give you 2012 vibes all over again, and in a way that I think is actually beneficial and that will hopefully stand the test of time. I'm just intrigued now to see how this movie does. I hope people see it. I hope it's not a bomb. I think the most fascinating thing for me now is to see how well it does. But hopefully, our review, adding on to all the other reviews that are out there, will indeed help and convince you to go and see the Thunderbolts. So that will do it for our review of Marvel's Thunderbolts. Asterisk. Once again, we are No Drama, Just Movies. Thank you very much for checking out our review today, guys. Once again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hop down in that comment section below. Like, comment, share, let us know what your thoughts are on this movie, what your thoughts are on the post-credit scene, and what your anticipation now is for the Fantastic Four. Once again, my name is Cameron, so that asterisk does mean something, Kelly Smith, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague here.
I dare you to watch this again and take a shot every time he says that. I'm Phil. Always some kind of Thunderbolt squad going.
Oh, that's right. Once again, we are No Drama, Just Movies. Thank you very much for checking out our review today, guys, and we will see you very, very soon. Take care, guys.
Shots!